Got a pretty high stock market right now. The Dow hit 17,000 this week. He thinks that's at the top, and he's going to talk about what he thinks is next. And he's not the only one who's talking about that. We've got Donald Trump saying that Americans need to prepare for financial ruin. But he's going to be joining us later in the show. Of course, yesterday we had Peter Van Buren, who was talking about the ghost of Tom Joad, essentially a retelling of the Depression-era story of Grapes of Wrath, putting that in the context of not the Dust Bowl, but the Rust Belt. So that was kind of a fictional take on it. Today we're going to have someone who's going to talk to us about the economics of it, about the metrics of it. We have a couple of stories that are breaking. You know, even as I was driving into work today, even PBS is talking about health concerns at the border. As the border collapses and we see anyone and everyone coming in, as we see people being held in very close quarters and conditions that are less than ideal for sanity, we see that even they're talking about it, but of course they're downplaying the risk. They're talking about it because they want to reassure people that there's not any risk. Well, there actually is, and you know, as we interviewed people over the weekend, we were told by Border Patrol agents, and there's a story that's still up on Drudge today, 2 more swine flu cases confirmed among minor detainees, another 2 treated for flu-like symptoms. This is Don Salazar's story. We talked to Border Patrol agents there. They were very concerned. Border Patrol agents are testing positive for some of these diseases, not just H1N1, but other diseases that are coming in. They contacted the CDC, and the CDC said, that's not our job. Clearly, they're not worried about it, but they are worried enough about it to essentially tell the government mouthpieces and the mainstream media to start reassuring the public that, don't worry, that we're not going to open the door to a pandemic or maybe to terrorism or to drug cartels. It's just for the children that we're collapsing the borders. Also up today, we've got a story, a further breakdown of what happened with Facebook as people discovered that they were part of a very large experiment to see if Facebook, with its massive reach, could manipulate the public's mood. Answer, yes, they can. But there's a little bit more to that. Actually, they're linked to Pentagon research on civil unrest. This is a story that's up on InfoWars. Steve Watson points out that the research appears to be at least in part connected to a Pentagon-led project called the Minerva Initiative. So we're going to break that down for you and the connections there at Cornell University. But there's a huge story that's coming out. Of course, a bill has been introduced in California. California is AB 1014, labeled the most draconian gun control legislation in the country. This is a bill that would allow the police to confiscate guns based on accusation alone. Based on accusation alone. Now, this is something that ought to concern everyone, not just people who favor gun control. This is something that even the people who favor gun control, I should say, should be concerned about this, because this is another area where they're gutting due process and real trials. It's another area where we're moving into a kind of a star chamber legal system. You know, we have the FISA court. That's not a real court. It's just a single judge. No adversarial relationship there. No jury. You don't have a jury of your peers before your rights are taken away with this. We should be very concerned about things like the FISA court. We should be very concerned about things like this California law, regardless of the issue. Whether it's about guns or whatever, we should be concerned that people's fundamental rights, that their property can be taken away merely by accusation.
This is Leanne McAdoo for InfoWarsLife.com. I'm here with Dr. Edward Group, Master Herbologist and Chief Formulator behind the InfoWars Life products. Dr. Group, what have you been hearing from women who've started taking Super Female Vitality?
You know, we've heard the reviews and feedback from Super Male Vitality, from emails to even excited callers on the radio. Now, the answer for women is here. A new formulation specifically designed for the female body, Super Female Vitality, delivers 10 key herbs that work synergistically to revitalize the unique biology of women.
I'm so glad that you guys made this for women. When he brought me home the bottle of Super Female, I had tons of energy, tons of motivation, a lot of drive. My husband thinks I've been in a better mood. Our relationship, all I can say is it's a lot better now.
I've just started taking Super Female Vitality from InfoWarsLife.com. Supplies are limited, so secure yours today at InfoWarsLife.com, InfoWarsStore.com, or dial 1-888-253-3139.
Alex Jones is going to be joining us live in the studio later in the show. We're also going to have Harry Dent, the economist, talking to us about what he sees as the challenges ahead. And of course, yesterday we had Peter Van Buren giving us a fictional look at the current situation in America's decline since the 1950s, kind of a retelling of the Grapes of Wrath, calls it the Ghost of Tom Joad, the story of the 99%. He looks at the decline since the 1950s. And of course, as we heard Hemingway say in his book, The Sun Also Rises, one of the characters is asked how he went bankrupt. And he said, well, gradually at first and then suddenly. And that's the way we believe this is going to roll out. Things are certainly accelerating. We have the collapse of the border as part of the Cloward and Piven strategy, strategized back in the 1960s to collapse the United States with a welfare state, an entitlement state, to rapidly increase that to the point that it could no longer be sustained, so they could rebuild on the ruins of America, the kind of socialist utopia that they want to see. And that is a common recurring theme, to see people talking about destroying America so they can rebuild their socialist utopia. We went to see America last night by Dinesh D'Souza. It was an early release. Its official release is today. And that was a common theme. You hear that a lot, that America has to be destroyed so that we can rebuild something completely different. I liked the film. I give it a thumbs up. I'm going to talk a little bit later, though, a little bit more qualified about that. Several of us with InfoWars went there last night, and we uploaded a review that's now up on YouTube. Jakari Jackson, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs, Kit Daniels, and I, and my son Travis, we all went and we talked to what we saw about that. But I wanted to break that down a little bit more because I think there's a little bit more to it. You know, the movie that I really am anxious to see was the one that they previewed, which was about Gary Webb, that's coming up in October. It's called Kill the Messenger. It's played by Jeremy Renner. I hope that they're going to really lay out what happened with Iran-Contra, with the crack cocaine epidemic that the CIA created in L.A. with Freeway Ricky Ross, and the murder of Gary Webb, not the suicide of Gary Webb. You know, he was killed. I hated to see, one of the things I didn't like in the Dinesh D'Souza movie was, although he talked about Aaron Swartz, he talked about it as if he had been driven to suicide. I don't believe that his psychological outlook was one that was conducive to suicide. We've seen this so many, many times. And I don't think that Aaron Swartz was driven to suicide. Carmen Ortiz, the prosecutor there, her husband tweeted that they had offered him a deal, not a 35-year in prison, but just a few months, and he turned that down. He was a fighter. He was every bit as much of a fighter as Dinesh D'Souza. And if Dinesh D'Souza suddenly commits suicide, I'm not going to believe that either. I think you ought to see this movie. I think there's a lot to talk about. It talks about real substantive stuff. I mean, go to see it instead of Transformers. I mean, you'll be talking about Transformers and asking yourself and everybody that saw it, what was that about if you do go waste your money on that? But this is something that's real. This is something that you can talk about. And, of course, you're not going to agree with everything he has to say because it's politics. And nobody agrees totally on politics, just like they don't agree on religion. Now, we have a key story that's up on Infowars.com today. A bill would allow the police to confiscate guns based on accusations alone. This is California's bill AB 1014, labeled the most draconian gun control legislation in the country. They would allow the police to confiscate a person's firearms solely on the basis of an accusation made against the gun owner by a family member or a health professional. See, that's one of the dangerous things that we did in the wake of some of these mass shootings. People on the right started saying, hey, we need to give the psychological community power over our lives. That is insane. That's really insane. And people, even people who support gun control, should be concerned about this because of the loss of due process. In so many areas of our lives, we are seeing due process thrown under the bus, shredded, destroyed. Whether it's the NDAA or whether it's things like this, we need to have an adversarial trial. We need to have a real trial with a judge, with somebody representing the other side. We need to have a jury. We've pretty much lost jury trials. They've used threats and escalated the charges so much that most people don't go with the jury trial. And part of that is because the judges have been lying to the juries about what their real power and their responsibility is. We need fully informed juries who understand that they're not there just to judge the facts of the law. They're there to judge the law itself. We have many state constitutions that say that explicitly, and it is implied in all of the history of English common law that that is the responsibility of juries. We have to watch each other's backs. That's where the people have their greatest power, in veto, and that is in vetoing laws. That's one of the ways that we stopped alcohol prohibition even before they repealed that amendment. So this is something that ought to concern everybody. And here's an example that's given out of the article. If, for example, person A goes to a judge and files a complaint about person B can then have his or her guns and gun rights taken away without any idea why, or to even have a chance to plead their case. Do you really want to throw due process away to that extent? Only after law enforcement searched person B, their family, friends, place of work, anywhere else that police might have thought person B would hide guns, would that person then have the right to defend themselves. You would be guilty until proven innocent. You know, we've seen that happen with all of the regulatory agencies. They all operate under this civil idea that because they're going to file a quote-unquote civil action against you, whether it's the IRS or the EPA or the Bureau of Land Management or whoever it is, all of these organizations that have been created, the Congress has essentially abdicated their legislative responsibilities to these groups, these fiefdoms, these bureaucracies. They create their own internal courts where you are guilty and have to prove your innocence. They even have, in many cases now, their own police that they're heavily arming. We need to be very concerned about this trend in America. And look at this hypocrisy. We see the Wall Street Journal reporting that the security detail for Fed chairwoman irks her neighbors. This is Janet Yellen. They said one of the most powerful economic policymakers in the world moved into the neighborhood and ruined it, according to many. They say the neighbors said earlier this year the security detail protecting new Federal Reserve chairwoman Janet Yellen barreled through the cul-de-sac where she lives in oversized vans loaded with guns, cameras, and takeout pizza. It established an armed camp, they said, next door to Mrs. Foreman's townhome, according to a written bill of grievance presented by concerned neighbors, demanding that the uniformed police presence is uncomfortable for residents of various religious persuasions like Quakers. But listen to some of the things that they do. They had said security trucks weighing approximately 7,000 pounds each sit idling on the street for approximately 22 minutes each day as she's getting ready for her morning pickup. And then, of course, they race out along with their Secret Service police. The government is paying $5,000 or $6,000 a month or more to rent an entire townhome in Georgetown to put the cops in. Now, this picture that's at the top of the article has a card stuck in the window that says Federal Reserve Police on official business. Yeah, we're offering the kind of protection to this private corporation. The head of this private corporation, the Federal Reserve, is not federal. It is private. And this bankster, this gangster, is getting security from the feds like she's the president or the vice president. We didn't provide this kind of security probably to the president before World War II. And now look at what we do for our banker-in-chief. Now, as we're talking about prohibition and what they're doing, what they're trying to do with guns, we should remember how this has turned out with alcohol prohibition. We should remember how it turned out with marijuana prohibition, for example. Look at this report from the Liberty Crier. It says 6 months of legal marijuana, and Colorado has more cash and less crime. Now, they point out that there's been a 10% decrease in overall crime from the last year in Colorado and a 5.2% drop in violent crime. They have taken in $10 million in taxes in just 10 months. Guess what? We can handle freedom. We can handle marijuana and guns. What we can't handle is prohibition, because prohibition gives a monopoly to the worst elements of society, to organized crime. That's why you got a lot of law enforcement against prohibition. I've talked many times with that organization, LEAP. We've interviewed them on the nightly news, on the radio here. They're against prohibition because prohibition itself is a problem. It destroys society. It increases crime. And you're going to see crime increase a lot if you prohibit guns, even more so than the prohibition of marijuana. You're going to see guns take a new and virulent form as they're released into a free black market. You're going to see design take off, just like you've seen in alcohol prohibition, the increase in the concentration of alcohol, just as you saw in all drug prohibition, the increase in concentration. Even in marijuana, they increased it during prohibition. And of course, news has also come out. This is interesting. This is up on Infowars.com. Former Arizona Governor Gary Johnson is now becoming the CEO of a pot company. He says, I'm excited about this. I think this is really a change in the world kind of thing. The company is going to be Nevada-based. It's cannabis sativa or sativa. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sativa. Thank you. Thank you. So anyway, that's gonna bear watching. Now, on economics news, we have a lot of news coming up, and we're going to be right back. We're coming up to a break, but of course, Donald Trump is telling us that we need to prepare for financial ruin. And of course, later in the show, we're going to be talking to Harry Dent, and we're going to see what he thinks about the timing. We've talked in recent days to Gerald Celente and others. It is accelerating.
Everything we said came true. Everything we've done has been right.
There's a lot of economic news that's popped out in the last couple of days. Of course, we know that the border collapse is part of a planned economic collapse of America, but it's not just there that it's happening. We're going to see some massive new taxes everywhere that are going to be rolling out. One of those is coming in the form of highway taxes. As I reported just last week, we see all of these mainstream media outlets talking about a 12-cent hike in the federal gas tax, a 12-cent hike. It's not a 12-cent hike. Right now, the federal gas tax is 18 cents per gallon. So if you add 12 cents to that, you're doing a 67% increase in federal taxes. Now, Obama released this plan yesterday. It's a very large plan. He says his highway plan is not crazy, it's not socialism, and it's not an imperial presidency. Well, actually, it's going to be a lot of corporate cronyism. It's going to be a lot of corporate fascism, economic fascism. But there is a socialist aspect of it. Even though they're going to increase all of these taxes, a lot of these taxes are not going to be going to your roads and to your bridges. They're going to be building the socialist dream, and that is light rail, commuter trains, that sort of thing. Here's a clip from Obama.
It's not crazy. It's not socialism. You know, it's not, you know, the imperial presidency, or no laws are broken. We're just building roads and bridges like we've been doing for the last, I don't know, 50, 100 years.
Yeah, right. It's also not a 12-cent bump. It is a 67% bump in gasoline taxes. And that's not the only place where they're going up on things. We got a article on Infowars.com from Zero Hedge. It says interest on new student loans is going to rise by 20%. Starting July the 1st, all new loans for the 2013-2014 student year will increase from 3.86% to 4.66%. And he does the math. He actually does math. That's a 20% increase. But see, the mainstream media would present that to you and say, that's less than a penny. What they're doing is, look at this in the context of what's happening at the border. They're opening the border. They're offering either in-state tuition to illegal citizens, as John Bound calls them, and that's a good way to put it, because, of course, as he said, they're illegal, but they get all of the benefits of citizens. Actually, they get even more benefits than citizens. Citizens can't go to another state that they haven't lived in and get in-state tuition, but the illegal citizens can. They can even get full ride tuition at many of these places. Now, if you're an American citizen, if you're a legal citizen, then you're going to have to essentially work for these banksters the rest of your life, because even if you go bankrupt, you're not going to be able to get rid of the student debt. But of course, there is a way for you to get out, and that is if you will pledge to do indentured servitude to the federal government, to Washington. People are catching on. You know, Obama just came out in a Quinnipiac poll that voters think he's the worst president since 1945. 33% of the voters think that Obama is worse than any other president since World War II. George Bush came in second at 28%. Third place was Richard Nixon, and he was at 13%. Jimmy Carter was at 8%. You know, there's something else that people can agree on, and this is a very good sign. 74% of Americans don't believe that they have to give up privacy for security. That is a false trade, just like giving up your liberty for security. If you give up your liberty for security, you will never have any security. Slaves don't have security. To the extent that you give up your liberty, to that extent you become a slave. And if you give up all of your liberty, you live in a prison. It's called maximum security. And so now people have been told that for a long time. They need to trade off liberty for security. And so many people buy that because they've been propagandized about that for so long. But they haven't been propagandized about this privacy issue for very long. And the encouraging thing about this is that this is across all 7 political categorizations of the Pew Research Center that took this poll. And let's look at these different ones. Now, the highest one was the hard-pressed skeptics. That was 83%. The lowest ones were tied for the Next Generation Left and the Faith and Family Left. They only agreed at 66%. I thought that the left was unified, that we all have a right to privacy. Oh, I'm sorry, that's just what they mean when they say abortions. They don't really want you to have real privacy, but at least even there, a majority, 66%, don't want to see that trade-off.
Alex Jones here to break down some exciting developments in the area of research concerning supplemental iodine. It's nothing less than phenomenal. I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. And I used some of the mainline iodine supplements and they upset my stomach and I had some issues with it. Until I discovered a product being developed by Dr. Group, who I was already interviewing as an expert on my radio show, and I began taking the product before he actually rolled it out. You now know it as Survival Shield True Nascent Iodine that your body can really absorb. Then, about a year ago, he said, listen, if you think this is powerful, I'm going to come out with rare earth, deep earth crystals that are incredibly powerful that no one else has as a source for their iodine from between 7,000 and 12,000 feet, literally drilled out of the ground. You put it on a hot plate and it turns into the pure gas. No one else has 99.99% pure iodine. And the results that I personally have had have been life-changing. I was over 270 pounds. And with the iodine, exercise, and better diet, I have lost now more than 50 pounds total, and I'm continuing to lose the weight. I have more energy, my libido, all this crap came out of my skin. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. This is innovating. This is trailblazing. And the best part is it helps fund Infowars.com, the radio show, the TV show, the whole media operation promoting true libertarian ideas. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox special at InfoWarsLife.com.